Drop an experienced wilderness survival instructor into the deep Amazon with full modern equipment, and there is a real chance they do not survive 48 hours without assistance. Drop a 12-year-old from an Amazon tribal community into that same jungle with nothing, and they will eat well, sleep dry, navigate with precision, and likely be back home before the sun sets twice. The gap between those two outcomes is not about toughness. It is not about pain tolerance or willpower. It is about 5 specific skills, refined over thousands of years and passed down through direct childhood immersion, that almost nobody outside these communities has ever been taught correctly. Because almost nobody outside these communities has ever needed to learn them at all. The first skill is water, not finding it. The Amazon is saturated with water, more than almost anywhere on Earth. The actual skill is knowing which water will keep you alive and which will kill you slowly enough that the mistake does not become obvious until it is far too late to correct. The rivers and streams of the Amazon carry a biological load that would defeat most standard civilian purification methods. Multiple waterway systems contain strains of leptospira bacteria, several species of intestinal parasites, and in certain tributaries, the larvae of parasitic worms capable of penetrating skin on contact, making even wading dangerous without specific seasonal knowledge of which waterways are safe and when. Amazon tribes do not drink from rivers indiscriminately, and they do not treat all water sources the same way. The Kayapó people of the Xingu River Basin in central Brazil assess water quality using a set of indicators most outside observers would never think to check: the precise color and flow rate of the water, the presence or absence of specific aquatic plant species, and the behavior of fish and insects near the surface, all of which shift in predictable, learnable patterns depending on upstream conditions and seasonal cycles. A source assessed as borderline is not avoided outright. It is treated using a combination of crushed seeds from the copaiba tree and the inner bark of the cumaru tree, boiled into a preparation that researchers at the University of São Paulo analyzed in 2014 and found reduced bacterial load in test samples by margins comparable to commercial purification tablets available in any outdoor supply store. This single skill, reading a water source correctly before drinking from it, is frequently the difference between a sustainable 48-hour survival window and a medical emergency that quietly begins building on day 1 and becomes undeniable by day 3, long after the water has already been consumed. The second skill is food, and it rests on a piece of knowledge that runs directly against modern intuition. In the Amazon, the most reliable and most nutritionally dense protein source is rarely the animal most people would picture first. Hunting large game in dense Amazon jungle is inefficient. The canopy limits visibility, the terrain limits pursuit speed, and a failed hunt can cost hours of energy expenditure for zero caloric return. Amazon tribes understand this trade-off and structure their primary food-gathering strategy around something far more reliable: insect larvae, particularly the larvae of the palm weevil, Rhynchophorus palmarum, found inside the trunks of specific palm species across the Amazon basin. Researchers analyzing the nutritional content of these larvae have consistently found protein concentrations comparable to beef, along with a fat profile rich in beneficial unsaturated fatty acids. A caloric and nutritional package that, gram for gram, rivals or exceeds farmed meat available in any modern grocery store. Locating an active colony requires specific knowledge: which palm species host the larvae, What visible signs on the trunk indicate an active colony versus an empty one, and the seasonal timing window during which the larvae are present in harvestable numbers. For someone with that knowledge, locating a meaningful protein source takes a fraction of the time and energy that tracking and successfully hunting larger game requires, with a dramatically higher success rate. The third skill is shelter, and the speed at which it happens is the detail that most consistently surprises outside researchers who have observed the process firsthand. An experienced builder working alone can construct a fully functional shelter in under 2 hours, using only materials collected within a 50-meter radius of the build site. No tools beyond what can be fashioned from the immediate environment, no fasteners beyond natural fiber, and interlocking structural design. The resulting structure is elevated, typically 60 to 90 centimeters off the ground, and that specific height range was not chosen arbitrarily. It sits above the primary movement corridor, used by the majority of venomous ground-dwelling species in the region, while remaining low enough to be structurally stable, using nothing but locally available materials. Sleeping directly on the jungle floor exposes a person to ground-level insects, ground-level reptiles, and a degree of ambient humidity that accelerates hypothermia even in an environment with consistently warm air temperatures. A counterintuitive risk that catches most untrained survivalists by surprise. The fourth skill is navigation, and it has essentially nothing to do with a compass, because for most of the Amazon's history, no compass existed and none was needed. Experienced hunters read their environment the way a trained musician reads a full orchestral score, not one instrument at a time, but as a single, continuously updating integrated perception. Wind direction, canopy density, the directional flow of nearby water sources, the specific call patterns of bird species that shift detectably when a large predator has recently moved through the area, the movement direction of leafcutter ant columns, which change course in response to ground moisture conditions that reliably precede flash flooding events upstream. None of this is processed sequentially, the way a person checking a map processes information step by step. It is processed simultaneously, as ambient awareness, refined by an amount of repeated exposure that most adults entering the jungle for the first time simply do not have access to. Researchers working in collaboration with the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine documented Matsés hunters of the Javari Valley, returning to their village from distances exceeding 40 kilometers of dense, visually uniform, unmarked jungle, arriving within minutes of their own estimated travel time, with no trail to follow and no visible landmarks of any kind to reference. When researchers attempted to understand how this was possible, the conclusion they eventually reached was not a teachable technique. It was a developmental finding. This level of environmental integration appears to depend on neurological pattern formation that begins in early childhood, during a window of heightened neuroplasticity that closes substantially by adulthood. No training program, regardless of length or resources invested, reliably reproduced equivalent results in adult military personnel. The fifth skill is danger avoidance, and it functions less as a reactive skill and more as a continuous, automatic background process that prevents most dangerous encounters from ever fully developing in the first place. Before any experienced hunter moves into deep jungle terrain, an environmental risk assessment happens almost involuntarily. Reading recent signs of predator movement in the underbrush, checking the underside of specific broadleaf plants for a particular fungal growth pattern that correlates reliably with the atmospheric pressure changes that precede violent afternoon storms, and noticing subtle shifts in the overall density and pattern of ambient animal sound that indicate something nearby has changed even before the specific cause becomes visible. What ties these 5 skills together is not instinct in the way the word is commonly used, and it is not luck. It is the same underlying mechanism that produces genuine expertise in any field on Earth. Sustained, repeated observation, accumulated across many generations, continuously refined by real consequence, until only the practices that worked reliably were the ones that survived to be passed forward to the next generation. The difference that separates this knowledge from most other forms of expertise is the stakes embedded in the refinement process itself. In most professional fields, getting something wrong costs time, money, or reputation. In the Amazon, getting any one of these 5 skills meaningfully wrong has historically cost lives, directly and immediately. What remains today, embedded in the daily, almost unremarkable practice of Amazon tribal communities, is not primitive knowledge in any honest sense of that word. It is the surviving output of an extraordinarily long and genuinely unforgiving filtering process, thousands of years during which mistakes were not hypothetical. Anyone could, in principle, learn the individual facts behind each of these 5 skills in isolation, memorizing which specific plants purify which categories of water, identifying which insects provide the most efficient protein return, calculating the optimal height for a sleeping platform, recognizing which environmental signs indicate elevated danger. None of that underlying information is inherently inaccessible to an outsider willing to study it. What cannot be easily transferred, and what research has consistently struggled to replicate through formal instruction, is the integration of all 5 simultaneously under real conditions without the luxury of addressing them one at a time. The Amazon does not present these 5 challenges in a controlled sequence, with adequate time to think carefully between each one. It presents all 5 simultaneously and continuously, for as long as a person remains inside that environment. Water assessment happening at the same time as danger awareness, food gathering decisions happening alongside navigation calculations, shelter planning, factoring in everything observed throughout the day. Amazon tribes do not experience these as 5 separate, discrete skills practiced in isolation from one another. They function as a single, continuous, deeply integrated way of perceiving an entire environment, a perceptual framework that most of the modern world has simply never had occasion to develop. 48 hours inside the Amazon would test every one of these 5 skills simultaneously, without interruption, without a controlled training environment, and without the option to pause and reset between challenges. For someone who grew up immersed in that environment from early childhood, none of it would register consciously as survival in the dramatic sense the word usually implies. It would simply feel to them like an ordinary Tuesday.